Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we have a 2024 Ford E450 E-Series Cutaway, and we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install these front SumoSprings for your front suspension. From the factory, a lot of these vehicles, a lot of these RVs, especially the E450s, are going to have a very weak suspension. And I say weak in that they create this E450 chassis for all kinds of different vehicles. You can see them out there on delivery trucks. You see them on the vehicles that you can pick up stuff from your house and moving equipment, stuff like that. So what they do is they basically create the chassis, and then it is up to the manufacturer of the motorhome company to put whatever type of box they want on top of it. Ford creates the chassis, and then the motorhome companies will put a box on top of it. Well, they don't put a whole lot of thought into the suspension and the handling of the vehicle because that comes pre-done already. Now, something that Jayco did do, and it's called the JRide system on their motorhomes, and it's optional. And this particular owner of this vehicle did add some of those JRide components on here, which I think it came with the upgraded shocks and springs. It came with a rear sway bar. He added a Hellwig front sway bar. He added a steering stabilizer. So he's on the right path. What I always recommend is SumoSprings. I really like these because what they do is they will actually limit the travel and make it a lot softer ride. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to mount to the bottom of your frame rail. They're going to touch the top of your front axle. And essentially what they do is, instead of the inch that we had before, we'll show you here in a little bit, the factory jounce bumper was about half this height. So what it'll do is it's really going to help with body roll. It's going to give you a lot more confidence when you're driving on the road. A lot of the biggest problems is that these rigs are like giant buildings going down the road, so it's going to catch a lot of wind. And what that does is it leans the whole RV the whole time while you're driving. That's going to cause you to have to feel like you're trying to correct the steering the entire time you're driving. So if you've ever heard of white knuckling, or if you've ever done it yourself, it's very scary and very tiring to drive a rig when you're white knuckling. These are really going to help with that. It's going to limit that amount of body roll so that you have confidence when you're driving on the road. These SumoSprings and all SumoSprings are going to be made out of a microcellular urethane, which is essentially a very, very dense foam. So you have like packing foam, stuff like that, sponges. Those have very large air pockets in it. These have micro air pockets, so it makes the spring pretty stiff. These are going to have a very, very high weight capacity, 1,000 pounds. That is at 50% loaded. So just keep that in mind. What's nice about these though is as you are compressing them, they will have a progressive spring rate. So the more and more they're compressed, the harder and harder they get. So what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to push the axle back down, keeping you straight on both sides headed down the road. To show you truly how fast this installation is, we're just going to shoot this in real time. Tom's going to keep the camera rolling to see how fast it is. This is a 10mm socket. I'm going to break this bolt loose. Pull this down. Set that aside. And take your jounce bumper or your SumoSpring, and in this threaded hole, just thread it into place. Make sure you're not cross-threading them. The longest part of this process is probably going to be getting your motorhome up in the air, because we did lift it up by the jacks. We just put some jack stands under it to stabilize it, and that gave us this extra room in between the axle and the bottom of our frame rail. Once you get this close, you just want to try to get two hands on it and just tighten it as tight as you can with your hands. There we go. And now we're just going to repeat that process on the passenger side. Now, we talked a lot about our front Sumo Springs, but ultimately, if you're having issues with the front, having problems with sway or some movement from side to side, I highly recommend looking into Sumos for the rear also. The order of suspension upgrades for a motorhome that I always recommend, I've recommended to several of my friends that have motorhomes, is I would do front and rear Sumos with a front steering stabilizer. This helps to keep the front wheels centered so that you don't have to overcorrect all the steering and stuff like that when you're getting those high winds and the sway. Then I would do front and rear sway bars second. And the reason why that is because SumoSprings will help the body roll from side to side, but they also help up and down movement. So if you feel like you're hitting bumps, or when you go over a pothole or something like that, you feel like the back end of the coach is slapping, so like you feel like the whole coach is hitting hard, that's because that rear sway bar is not doing anything for up and down movement. The SumoSprings do. That's why I recommend SumoSprings first, because they do both. And then if you have a really bad problem with, I have a friend that has a Class A coach. He had a really bad problem. His coach came with no suspension upgrades. It was just factory, the same thing that's on like a UPS van. Basically, it's just leaf spring packs, front and rear, and he had nothing else to help support it. So he ended up doing all 5 of those, front and rear Sumos, front and rear sway bars, and a steering stabilizer, and he is much happier. Hopefully this video helped you decide whether or not the front Sumo Springs are right for you and your 2024 Ford E-Series Cutaway.